Thank God for Acer. Oh, this paper. Oh, actually, there's some chapters.
I'm sorry, I had to use the bathroom. I'm sorry, Chief. I realized if we put Will Van Turen and Kyle Dennis on this panel, we would have a complete line of secession.
You thought about that, huh?
Well, I saw the posting and was like, well-qualified panel. Name's on the cup, right?
It's a very winning fantasy.
Yeah, Kevin won it a while ago, so you don't know, right?
Don't remind me, it's been 6 years.
Things have changed.
We don't put our hands on our head anymore. Back debates.
Unless you go to the gala,
Which
where you get shamed by the judges.
next week was going to be a gala fest.
Is it next week?
Uh-huh. And it's going to be huge because they're hosting PyCap this year. So people are going to be checking out the area judges for PyCap, I guess.
Did I do that?
I don't know. But supposedly it's supposed to be huge because they're hosting PyCap.
It's not like they have philosophies or anything on that tournament, do they?
No.
Yeah, Watchman's going to the beach. Do you want these? They're abandoned in
Yeah, and I'll get them one. Thanks.
No, I don't.
There's just us and McKendry. And Unsol.
I'm gonna be good when everyone else is good.
Yeah, I'm ready. I don't look it, but I am.
You look great.
Lisa.
You're good with it? Yep. Cool.
What the hell is that behind you? Moby Dick. Sorry. Now I'm ready.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Anything else like to
I just got. You lost me for a
Oh
second.
man, you lost me for the rest of the debate.
I'm focused on how it's eating Mitch's head. Just
Observation 1 is the resolution analysis. Even as resolution, the United States federal government should confirm Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. The east one is should be by the retainer of net benefits once falls. You should evaluate the benefits plan that we present versus the opportunity cost disadvantages to plan. The observation 2 is inherency. Chuck Hagel's not getting confirmed to status quo. There is no unified support for Democrats because people don't believe it's going to be sufficiently aligned with the Democratic platform, and the GOP doesn't like it because of his rhetoric on spending cuts. Thus, observation 3 of the plan text, it will stun you. The United States federal government should confirm Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. The United States federal government should confirm Chuck Hagel as Secretary of Defense. Funding and enforcement, if those existed, would be normal means. Israel-Palestine is advantage 1.
Wait, enforcement?
Enforcement is what that's about. Yeah. Everything normal means button. No. Ace of is unique as the number one is the United States has a soft line approach on Israel and status quo. The ace of is that Obama has actually moderated for his election. He hasn't pushed for anything like a 7-month freeze, and he's been he's categorically supported Israel. The east one is we've actually continued our aid and arms sales to Israel, which allows them to retain their qualitative military edge, which is absolutely fundamental to our policy. We have not adopted, we have not cut at any point the C argument is that we've provided diplomatic shielding for Israel. We've stopped Palestinian statehood from going through the United Nations, and we've also stopped sanctions from Israeli international actions. The two arguments allows Israel to oppress Palestinians. The ace one is a qualitative military edge ensures that there's absolutely no action the Palestinians are able to take. The Palestinians developed their resistance tactics sending Hamas rockets in from Gaza and Lebanon, but this is shut down by Project Iron Dome, which was the United States funded project that ensures that they have nothing to fear, no reason not to oppress. The piece of point is that we actually provide intel sharing, which is absolutely key to their ability to shut down Palestinian resistance movements and continue to oppress Palestine. The Syrian we provide diplomatic shielding every time they commit human rights violations. The United States is able to shield them from the international community. This is important to Israel because they're part of they are a Western democracy that likes to be part of the global world order, but they would never be able to do that in the world of the United States wasn't supporting them. The next argument here is I don't know what that says. Probably good. Blank. What does this represent? A small shift away from our current attitudes towards Israel right now because of his rhetoric indicates that we're actually not unconditionally supporting Israel. Always before we indicated the United States is an unconditional friend and ally of Israel. It's not true that we would have a total divorce in relations from them, but it indicates that we're moving to a new era of relations where we actually require their behavior to conform with that we would expect from an ally. The second argument is that I'll get you at the bottom. The second argument is that the Secretary of Defense would always monitor the type of aid and sales that they actually get. He would have authorization over things like Iron Dome, which Israel believes is absolutely necessary to qualify military. They believe that the military threats externally present existential threats, which means that they need to have good relations with the Secretary of Defense. So they would have to comply with his actions. The third argument is he would always be able to control the rhetoric towards Israel, which is crucial to their standing in the international arena and to their internal politics and the politics of Palestinians both in Israel and who are refugees from Israel. The fourth argument is the military cooperation is absolutely key for Israel because they believe that they need us to be able to check Iran because we have the forward bases and everything else in the world where we criticize Israel and ask for and are generally in a position to ask for concessions from Israel. We'd always be able to solve back for this. This because we both train them and provide their military aid. The fifth argument is no reason this would collapse relations. A deputy foreign minister of Israeli affairs actually said that Chuck Hagel was fair and balanced and was a friend and was going to be someone that the Israel state could work with. The season internally, this would always cause. This would always cause fewer human rights abuses in Israel. This would eliminate. Or the United States would be able to bring them to a table, agreement with Camp David, and for all the other negotiations, the United States actually push pressure. Israel is absolutely forced to come to the table. The second argument is they'd be able to moderate Israel with anything else like aid, which means they would be less oppressive, less abusive of Palestine. These points, the number one is going to be oppression of Palestinians. Palestinians are oppressed and deny basic human rights. This is absolutely internally to genocide. It's purely true in this case because these rights are rejected to Palestinian citizens of Israel. That is why it is feasible for Israel to kill so many of them. That means that we saw back directly for death and dehumanization. We also saw back for regional stability. The continued pressure of Palestine is the biggest hot button issue in the region. It provides Iran with cover to actually have proxy networks in Israel and in Iraq and beyond that. Kill hundreds of thousands of people. It also makes non-state actor attacks a lot more likely, which will lead to Israeli response will lead to other regional wars or one for the United States. Yeah, China. The ace point is the Hegel appointment. There should be inevitable return. That's what the ace point is that they have increased tension is increasing. Dave said, actually, I said I'd get too much.
Never mind.
Cool. They said that they've increased the amount of ships and jets they have going into the Senkaku Islands. This is a new military ramp-up going on in the region. They also developed their Blue Water Navy and are expanding their military right now to be able to match the United States and be able to challenge us. The decent point is that there's actually we've taken no clear stance on the Senkaku Islands. We haven't said we would necessarily defend them or that we would try to de-escalate the conflict, which indicates that the next appointee of Secretary of Defense would be absolutely key. The seas than any other appointee would always be worse for China. The GOP was always going to ask for somebody more hardline who would actually be able to check China. There's a lot of China hawks in the GOP, which would indicate that they would need that for approval. The next argument is if they defeated the Hagel nomination, which is what the Democrats want, would deny the Democrats the capital to appoint who they wanted and reject someone like Hagel, and indicate someone like Hagel is not feasible. The ace point is links. The number one is that Hagel allows for China to count. The ace point is that in the interview he said that he wasn't worried about Chinese growth. This is the fundamental concern of China is that they believe that we are trying to stop their expansion and stop their peaceful rise and stop them from securing their own allies in the regions. B here is that, the number two argument is that he's actually praised China, which indicates that they're going to be able to have good relations. He's said that they're actually an ally in the region and said that they're in no way an obstacle to peace or economics argument. The next link argument looks like a specific concession to China. It looks like we are choosing with China in mind because this is the biggest issue that Hagel's been criticized for. So it always looks like we're specifically trying to cool relations with China, which would indicate that there would be a period of time to stop the escalation. The third argument is Hegel says that this is actually that alliance with China is absolutely necessary for our strategy by 2030, which indicates that it would be his top priority, that he believes is necessary long term, which means he'd be willing to do anything to get it done. Seize the internals. The number one is that an escalation is always going to work. The escalation gets any more extreme. That would always lead to China rolling in the Senkaku Islands. Japan would always backlash particularly because they have the LDP Prime Minister newly elected Shinzo Abe, who's a lot more hardline on China. That would lead to Japan actually becoming involved in drawing the United States. The second argument is that rhetoric would always be able to de-escalate this because it gives people actually out. The third argument is that we actually allow countries for an accident. The fourth argument is that we actually allow the tit for tat stop in which each country has to escalate to be able to check the other. We stop this logic at its source and short-circuited, allowing for a de-escalation to be taught. The decent point is the impacts. The number one is regional war in the Senkaku Islands or Taiwan. Both would involve the United States. Would be try-die for Chinese national and try-die for Chinese long-term strategy. So that would also fail to check. We also think the trade war will become inevitable, which would collapse the global economy, would lead to resource wars and mass poverty. The mass poverty in a world where the regional war didn't happen.
Two off. Advantage one, advantage two.
Do I want 4 sheets? If I want 4 sheets for okay.
Yeah.
If you want 4 sheets for okay.
Cool, I do.
It's not a very long email.
Nice stage.
Not bad.
Yeah, government's attempts to securitize itself through the other threat is merely the projection of our own security upon the other, deeming them as dangerous. We say such policies replicate the harms of the affirmative, acts of imagination, the affirmative described makes possible the ethical relationship of violence in the world, and this is the late efforts argument is securitization for policy. Affirmative frames Hegel as a pawn in an imperial game of chess. That is how we're perceived by other nations, and how we're perceived by other nations. The quest for empire. We said this just revives the status quo structure of international relations. Construct that in order to justify intervention. The construction of the threat in this case would be the case of China. And there's two. Also, the next argument is that the affirmative rights of war before it even begins. Their impact scenarios seems to indicate that all out violence is inevitable. All killing millions is the justification. This is the logic that justifies internal interventions in the United States, the internal use and growth of the military and defense industry. Whether or not it's necessitated, the second argument is the refusal to question the center of the affirmative United States approach to international relations is flawless. Somehow we are able to fix all the problems of our relationship towards Israel just by changing the pawn at the top of it. That something just went wrong with a bad Secretary of Defense, and now we can fix it by just changing one person. Honestly, it doesn't interrogate the definite cause of this issue. Third argument is mass violence in the. What's this word?
Oh, wait, mass violence in the home state.
Oh, mass violence in the home state. Potential Secretary Hegel has been extremely homophobic and violence towards the queer community in the home state, calling out them trying to indoctrinate the entirety of the military. This sort of violent rhetoric gets mass violent positives that Hegel can bring to the international community to exploit the impacts. First argument is the translations in the structure of international relations produces the worst scenarios that they're trying to solve for, which they make the first impacts inevitable in this world where the United States continues to be militaristic and antagonistic towards the rest of the world. The military makes extinction inevitable through the rapid growth of arms race and until it explodes. This would be the logic they are using in the uniqueness level of advantage too, but we think Hegel has the capacity to stop it in the long run. Makes this sort of game inevitable. And the third argument is securitization of the home space. We said that masking this sort of rhetoric is security state, like the security state post 9/11. We said it's caused massive amount of firepower and legitimizes state killings in the name of a greater state killings or atrocities in the name of greater international relations alternative. Vote negative to embrace vulnerability. Our first argument for vulnerability is best approach to international relations. We said the moment of embracing vulnerability exposed to the precarious position of the human life. Vulnerability is also what connects us. What connects us all. We never lash out in the world. We all perceive each other as vulnerability. Because our own vulnerability prevents the differentiation of the other from the staff. Our next argument is practical implementation alternative resulting in no Secretary of Defense is a legitimate position at all. Next argument is ethics. We say it's work for the fiat's not real. Obviously, it's an ethical situation between the judge between voting for affirmative and negative. We think that even in the face of impossibility, you should take the great leap of faith to endorse ethics of the negative. We would say that only the alternative has any sort of solidity in round for the proper ethics way to orient yourself toward international relations. Next argument is no permutation. First of all, it's ever representation of the PMC, and we said that it would just create a massive hydra when you still elect people as Secretary of Defense, but embrace vulnerability, replicate the harms of the militaristic state. We also said there are mutually exclusive. There would be no Secretary of Defense in a world of the. Okay, good. Mitch.
Yeah.
Is that? Ace point of view consistent. Let's get a pass and go for a couple. The first banner and
What's the pass, sorry?
Debt ceiling. Sorry.
Thank you.
Probably could have guessed it though. Banner and for Republicans came to the table said they were willing to cooperate with Obama. Obama passed through a vote on Monday, but this is predicated on Democratic support and them saying that they're going to do things like curb spending and not try to sneak in any more policies under the world. Next, their support is for Obama's concessions. Obama's concessions on having a balanced budget in 3 months has been the most important thing to get Boehner and the 84 Republicans on board because he hasn't had a budget in the last 4 years. This is a major concession. The GOP is also Also, the GOP's fraction status quo over issues like gun rights and literally split 50-50 means they have no ability to coalesce right now. Yes, last question.
Yeah, just status of alt. Foolishly.
Condo.
Cool.
Links. First argument is the GOP necessarily rallies around the nomination of Hegel. We would say that they've come out literally opposed to all policy of Hegel. They think that he's an anti-Semite. Excuse me. And they will coalesce against him. Against Obama for doing so. Voting against the ceiling. Next room is AIPAC lobby, which controls the GOP. 98% of the GOP got funding from AIPAC in the last election. Means the AIPAC unnecessarily lashed out because the debt ceiling tries to blame Obama in any way he can. Third argument is media folks away from the debt issue. It means the GOP can fight Obama on this issue and blame him. He's been at the head of the debt ceiling debate. Necessarily means that this is target initiative explain for internal links. First argument is that hey, necessarily to default on all of our loans. Watching economic advisors said this would be unprecedented and risk double the perception. Also, Fitch said that if we were to default, if we were to hit the debt ceiling, we would necessarily downgrade us from AAA status, which we think would lead to a massive shock in investor confidence and run on the stock market of the class of the United States. A dollar basis points, the index against a dollar, four different currencies all around the world. The worst means the class of the United States dollar implicates all of those countries. That leads to massive economic collapse, massive starvation, poverty, devastation, but also its ability to interact with regional wars. Full attempt to securitize resources could eventually go nuclear cause extinction, but it also causes massive starvation as pressure fluctuate in the market. Fluctuate the food market when the United States collapses, leads to the starvation. 2 billion people living on less than $2 a day. Okay, next one. Put on the impact level. Our arguments are by refusing to question why the oppression of Palestinians happening in the first place. That being that it's supported by United States policy, not just in the Secretary, not just in the position of Secretary of Defense, but all across all of our policy internationally. That necessarily allows us to continue. But our next argument is you're on the uniqueness level. Or actually, let's go to level. Israel necessarily freak out, securitize in a world where Hegel's elected. Our first argument is a framing argument that Israel's panicked by the United States support has caused massive lash outs in the past. For example, when the United States allowed Palestine to present to the United Nations, that literally led to an increase in settlements by 25%. Seems to indicate that Israel actually increases aggression in a world where they're worried about the United States commitment. Hegel has literally been labeled as an anti-Semite by the GOP and the international community. It means that Israel necessarily freaks out. And also, this is not a question of a symbolic shift away or a carrot versus stick. This is an ideological opposition, which means that it is not diplomatic pressure by Hegel, which means Israel does not think that they have the capacity to play ball in this instant. You good? Advantage 2. Impacts. First, you're just going to cross from the. Actually, I don't need that. We would say that this is an issue between Japan and China. This is indicated by your uniqueness. The United States has not gotten involved in this status quo, which means that who the United States implicates the Secretary of Defense will have no say on this issue. Also, we say that as long as we keep all of our military in South China Sea, China will never be able to escalate this war. We have 2 aircraft carriers in the region. We also have 12 aircraft carriers versus China, who have 1 aircraft carrier. It's my favorite argument ever. It's a converted casino. Means no chance they ever think that they'd be able to beat the United States and China. And this war necessarily means it will never escalate it. They will not go past the posturing that they're doing the status quo over a bunch of shitty rocks.
I would love to own an island.
Oh yeah.
So I just have it on the same height and mark right.
New sheet and then the critique? Okay.
And then another new sheet.
Oh no.
I did the same thing in my head.
Here's some extra paper.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, me too.
Are
Are you good?
Short.
Politics.
Sometimes it can't be that long.
Advantage 1 and new sheet, criticism, new sheet, politics, advantage 1, advantage 2. Okay.
New sheet, the take thesis, the alternative, and new sheet, debt ceiling, advantage 1 and advantage 2. And we're going to keep that up.
On the new sheet of paper, A is the interpretation of the judge should evaluate the parameters of comparison between the affirmative plan and competitive policy option. The judge should evaluate the parameter as a comparison between the affirmative plan and policy option enacted by the government via FIA. B is the violation, they're not a policy option. Competitive policy option enacted by the government via FIA. C is the parameter. The first argument is predictability. policy is a resolution next question of government action. That's what we came here to predict. Next argument is the government should select the framework for the debate in accordance with the PMC, allowing them to read this particular action and move the entirety of the PMC. We have no leverage against this. Next argument is South intervention. We have to judge with evaluate our hard impact rather than nebulous discourse of impact. The next argument is topic specific education, allowing them to read this critique, allowing sidestep topic specific education, which reason that probably is uniquely key, so we can debate about different things rather than just for construction. Next argument, this is key to ending their stable link around the fact that we read the other plain text for reason they get to read. And these arguments and these the voters, if you believe any of the above arguments, it's reason to vote against them for reasons of education and fair predictable ground. Next argument is for debating policy making in favor ecological discussion, totally paralyzed problem solving. This is argument that exigencies require action in basic purposes. The next argument is for that policy making is always going to be the real world activism. People have to understand how the system that operates, system that they want to change operates. The alternative debate, the first argument, the first argument is firm to both pass the plane and embrace the vulnerability. Firm to both embrace pass the plane, embrace the vulnerability. The argument, the first argument is the firm's theoretically legitimate. It includes all the plane and the alternative. It also doesn't interfere with the alternative solvency. All the alternative solvency says that we have to embrace the vulnerable. Also Butler makes the argument that differing claims don't require epistemological consistency. The next argument is double bind. Either the alternative is so strong that it can overcome the exception of perm, or the alternative is so weak that it can't overcome the exception of the plane would always be triggered by the links inherent in the text. The next argument is the case of this FD also probably should have done more work on the case if she didn't want me to waive this. If she didn't want me to waive this argument, the thesis argument. The first argument is constructing threats is the only logical outcome. It's also inevitable for a couple of reasons. The first argument is securitization is the result of the security to limit. One state can hurt another and live on anarchies and live in anarchies in the international system. The argument is securitization is inevitable with risk of first state. That means that even one state steps out of line, that this will totally break this. The next argument is the human nature breeds the threat. This is the most basic instinct of survival. This existed way before we started labeling people as labeling specific countries as threats, but people have always thought that other people were threatening them for things like resources. The next argument is these are logic based calculation the results of an outdated irrational system. The second argument is that all threats are created, which equals that securitization not all threats are created. We tell you securitization always prevents the biggest one. It prevents things like nuclear war and terrorism, because some of these things actually exist. I think all of the arguments on we've seen terrorist attacks, we've seen these threats exist in the status quo. The next argument is for anticipating conflict is always key to prevent them. The only way you can prevent these things from happening when they inevitably happen is by anticipating them happening. The next argument is deterrence theory that proves that threat construction is always going to be able to solve. That's why we don't have attacks in the status quo. The next argument is empirically proven the Western imperialism was not born of a constructed threat. Also, the non-securitized people have suffered like indigenous population. The next argument is there are alternate causalities for the impacts that they claim, like ideological differences. The next argument is from the global cooperation is always going to be key to protecting and ensuring calamity. When people securitize after the threats, that's why people work together to make sure these threats don't happen. I also want to turn an argument that only security. You don't need them.
Not too much more on this.
Well, then I won't.
Now you need to answer this.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
On the link today. They say that this brings take cause upon. We tell you that this is inevitable within the United States political system and within the world order. People and countries are always as fun. They say that we act like we falsely fix the problem. We tell you we make this marginally better. We don't say that we resolve all the issues in the world. We just say that we prevent the impact from happening. They say that we have mass violence in the home state and because of all these homophobic rhetoric. However, we tell you that this is not masking. One has already been condemned for these actions, meaning this has already been sold back. Also, he's already apologized for these actions. Everyone realized that he did a really messed up thing. They say that this leads to biopower. Looks back to biopower is inevitable because of things like the education and the healthcare system. We also tell you that biopower is going to be key to things like education and health system. Without biopower, there's absolutely no healthcare, no things like social security. That means a bunch of people die of poverty and disease-related things. They say you need to embrace the vulnerability, but we say you can't solve any of the stuff at home because you never embrace with the alternative, because you never embrace the queer population in the United States, meaning the alternative.
You embrace the vulnerability of the queer population in the United States. People like Hegel would be able to rush on.
Right. If you embrace this is an impact turn. If you embrace the population of the queer populations within the United States, this only increases the vulnerability of the queer population, because then people like Hegel have even more reason to ramp up their rhetoric. They say the firm is always going to be separate, but it's not, because we include the entirety of the PMC. I also want the firm argument to you to pass the plan and embrace vulnerability in every other instance. Have literally self-ban all of their offense. Okay. On the debt ceiling.
We're kicking the one.
Forget that. On the debt ceiling. Yes. The first argument is the debt ceiling passage is inevitable because the GOP said yesterday that they have enough support. To pass it in. They're willing to pass it. They probably should have read the news if they were going to read this argument. The next argument is the debt ceiling is key to both the GOP and Democratic platforms. That's the reason it's passed. The GOP needs it because if the economy collapses, the GOP looks really bad. And can never get re-elected because they're always blamed for the reason that the debt ceiling doesn't pass. Also, and they need to solve the economy. Also looks at that Winter's main argument, there's only an emphasis in process. The next argument is no links to Jew. Oh, peace seems Obama is strong, which means they know that if they try to rally against him, they're always going to lose it. They're never going to do this. They're never going to pick a winning battle because they know that they'll never get re-elected in a world which they do pick a winning battle. The next argument is linked to this actually passed 5 Republicans because they don't think Obama looks weak anymore because he's actually standing up for something that he said. They're on the impact level. They say the United States will default on lands, but loans will look to the fact that the United States will always create some kind of band-aid solution, and they'll look to the fact that it's totally empirically denied you that when we didn't when it took us a while to pass the debt ceiling in the first place, we didn't see this downgrade. They're also not reading any econ uniqueness arguments, meaning there's no emphasis. They get any uniqueness for this. Also look to the fact that any of the credit downgrades we've had in the past didn't trigger this. There's no way we do now. Advantage 1. They say this leads to an Israel freak out because of securitization in their payments without United States support. Look to the fact that Joe tells me when they only lash out when they have the United States support. If the United States doesn't support them anymore, they have no impetus to lash out. And the argument that it's literally impossible because they don't have the military or the funding. Also look to the fact that they're condemned by the international community means there's no chance they lash out because not only will they be condemned by the United States, but the rest of the countries throughout the world will also backlash against them. They say the ideological opposition means that this never solves. I send Joe's number 5 link argument which specifically answers this where he says that
Deputy Foreign Affairs Secretary said Hagel was cool.
Deputy of Foreign Affairs said Hagel was cool. Yeah, they of Israel said Hagel was cool. They say they refuse to question why the stabbing United States policy. We tell you that he's absolutely key to United States policy, meaning we tell you how policy actually is impacted by.
Our uniqueness is all U.S. policy bad, untrue.
Our uniqueness is all. They say all of our uniqueness is reasons why U.S. policy is bad and why it affects U.S. policy. Yeah, on China. They say that the issue with Japan and China and the Secretary of Defense doesn't have any ability to say this. I want you to accept just link argument where he says this specifically looks like a concession to China because it looks like Hagel wants a cool relation. It looks like Hagel wants a cool relation. Look to the fact the only reason China hasn't gotten into Japan right now is because the United States, they're afraid of the United States. They say there are a bunch of aircraft carriers that are always going to be able to check this. Look to the fact that China always miscalculates which checks back any of these arguments.
You can see the number 3 argument that if it's not Hagel, it's someone worse. The chances
Right, you can see the number 3 argument. It's not equal to someone worse, which guarantees us complete access to ramping up, which always checks back and makes it so
Okay. Politics TA overview, the K advantage for the administration.
Where are you starting on the critique?
I'm gonna go straight down the yellow. I'm gonna start with framework. So let me get my papers.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we have politics TA on top, and then.
This is how the Northwest debates, Kevin.
Kevin and I like each other.
Everywhere. Yeah. Okay. Politics debate on top, and then I guess we'll do the framework stuff. And then we'll do an overview on the K proper. And then okay, sorry. And then the K starting at the top of the thesis page. And then the link stuff and the alt. I guess it's kind of out of order of the LLC. Advantage 1 and advantage 2.
Cool.
But I'll let you know where I'm at.
Right. Be a long overview on kicking the K.
Okay, politics DA framework. The K with an overview, and then straight down the K, and then advantage 1 advantage 2. I think I have it. Ready? Politics is not going to never means there's no means no city office go to framework first counter interpretation negative gets one methodological test the discourse as well as the implementation of the plan test result first is the most inclusive resolves all of your counter all of your competition or all of your you don't get your app arguments because you get that your app is implemented you get to defend the hypothetical invention of your act with nothing more than you actually change the real world rather. But since you can see the academics and the other place, you can just rather what kind of world you conceptualize. Also, critical education is necessary to be able to check things like the state being bad. All of your assumptions are you extend a refusable question. You center the state argument here. Also, it's most inclusive because it allows for people to feel it. Also, allows for critical representation. Also, we don't move for any of the PMC. Also, flawed methodology lead to a flawed policy. That's our self-replicating arguments on the impact test case. Also, it's keeping a graph discussion on there's no topic areas that do their viral. They say it's a prediction because it's government action, but we're negative. We obviously need to be against government action. Second argument they say is that it shifts the frame remains and moves the entire PMC. You can defend the entirety of the rhetoric of the PMC as well as the hypothetical enactment of the plan. We just think it's a bad idea because you consider all your case terms. Third argument is the judge intervention wrong. You can obviously just weigh the impacts we have to give away impacts because we actually talk about things like arms race. If you say talk about education, we say that Hegel's homophobe. Actually talk about state security. You're probably the only ones that have actual tangible topics of education that affects every one of you in the round. You say it's necessary to stable once you get a reward for this vote here. Vote reasonably no. We submit y'all access to your app. No. Reason's not true. Go to the fake thesis over.
Look, I know that she made a lot of arguments, and I'm going to have to be blippy to cover all of her blippy arguments, but there's a couple concessions she made. The first is she conceded that the K turns the case. The fact that we view international relations as such, as this anarchical global power relations in which everything's zero-sum and we have to deter everyone, means that this type of arms race and escalation scenarios is precisely a product of the thought process. They conceded Miranda's ruling that they write the war into the world. Like, this is damning for them. They've also conceded the other thing, which is that they view Hegel as this pawn in which we never question U.S. relations. Rather, we just say that we had a bad Secretary of Defense, and we can just switch in and put in Hegel, and then it absolves all U.S. foreign policies, rather than addressing structural issues of IR, which is what only the alternative comes to grips with. The third argument that they conceded is the ethics debate. They conceded that ethics come first, and that the ethical relationship that they construct of the world is one that deems the other as threat and allows for actual real-world tangible violence. Only the alternative can solve this in-ground violence, which means there is some actual good reasons to vote for the alternative, even if it's in the face of impossibility, which we can't solve by international relations. Go to the line.
They say the threats are real. They say that the security dilemma is inevitable. Only the fact that you believe it's inevitable only is what makes it such. Means you have to have a radical theory of the alternative. Next, you say it's inevitable because states will already use it. Rather, the United States probably going to implement it. Even if other states use it, doesn't mean you should have the ethical act to continue to do it because it just justifies the legitimate asecurity of the home state. Also, escalating arms race means the United States has to we as people have to leave a fake. You say it's in human nature. That is pretty messed up. Just to say it's human nature, so therefore the state gets to kill a bunch of people. You say the logical calculation means IR inevitably has to be less multiple. Say it's so engaged in the world in which the United States has an aggressive military hegemony and trying to secure resources across the entirety of the world. Next, you say that there's other real threats like terrorism, nuclear war. Guess what? This is precisely where the refusal to question the values. Nuclear war. Guess who's the only one to use a nuclear weapon ever? It's the United States. No one else. Even though multiple other people have nuclear weapons. Also, terrorism is precisely we have one act in which a terrorist group is part of. We should view them as part of the global left, trying to push back against the United States hegemonic order. Rather, it leads to trying to securitize the straight to securitize the world and the world. The further lashing out leads to things like Iraq and Afghanistan. Multiple millions of people have died since then. And to let the securitization home state, they say trying to prevent conflict. Authority. Nothing else is why the wrong about. You say the threat threats. Solve deterrence. You have a reason why that's true, or why that happened. You say the Western imperialism wasn't the reason it happened. I would disagree. Also, that's not a reason why you shouldn't vote for the alternative stand. Or at least now that the first one is that you just view Hegel as a game of chess solves IR. Also, that you write the word for it against, which you conceded internally to the case. Also, refuse to question the United States implication of math. You've also conceded mass violence on the home state, like the fact that Hegel is a homophobe. He doesn't want any case in the military because it would be indoctrination of the military. That is an external impact that you have conceded. You say there's a bunch of alternative causes like ideology, the alternative, so we would be able to resolve that. You say global cooperation, you don't solve threats. You're not global cooperation, you're global militarism because we just get to replace Hegel and they keep going around killing everyone in the world. You go to the impacts extend. You send the trench case arguments ever to the survival. Why you do that? You've also conceded lead to extinction through an inevitable arms race. Like your firm, you concede that Hegel can do anything about that. Also, you concede the third impact, which is the home securitization of the home states, things like wild leads to legitimate killing in the name of international relations. The homophobe impact is pretty good on this argument. Go to the alternative extend. The embrace vulnerability, embracing vulnerability to resolve IR. You said this resolves our ethical difference, conceding that the alternative resolves ethics means that only in round impact. Also, you can see that we solve international relations because the United States is no longer militaristic. Means we solve the root cause of why people like terrorists or why China or why Iran is being taken this terrorist Israel in the first place. You say permutation, you go first. You can see it severs the entirety of the ideology of the BMC. It means it makes you. It also it's ever the plan to exchange. You can never embrace vulnerability and try to do this continual structural of international relations. Also you can see the Hydra debate that allows the means implementation just gets co-opted because you say that we still get to replace Hegel and the embracement solves everything, but rather just re-including the same status quo norms of international relations. You say it's legitimate because it contains all the arguments that you say that the all solves better because you cite Butler. You didn't cite a book or an argument or an essay or a page number or anything. I don't think this is offense for you. Next, you say this double bind already answered above why the double bind is actually reflexive. Also, double bind is not a good argument because the entire decay links there to syllables the app. Also, ethics is still a disadvantage. That was actual real world impacts on that. You said the case of the D out of the all. Rather you can see the method arguments, which means that not sure. Go to the next part. She says something. She says securitization never all resolved to stay. Said that the impact is marginally better. Now you can see the case turns you. Then so the homophobe says that he was already condemned and then he apologized. That proves the double bind. That perm doesn't actually work because you get to say he just apologized, so it's chill if he gets to go out and kill everyone. Make sure IR is still the same. Next they said biopowers now because education and healthcare. These are obviously something alternative questions and also not offense. But you also probably change the way the education form doesn't create a militaristic society. Next, you say that if we embrace vulnerability, we have to embrace Hegel. We can embrace Hegel. That doesn't mean we have to embrace IR or embrace Hegel as Secretary of Defense or embrace this chess game in which we go out and kill everyone. Case debate. Military cooperation. Obviously, we win the internally caused reasons why Israel would freak out. A reason why I think Israel is aggressive. All of the escalation terrorists in the Middle East is because the United States does its foreign policy issues. You can see the terror. Also, I want to say one link. You says that Israel likes Hegel. So that's like that secret thing in the back of your mind that you keep in head. If Israel likes, it's like, we can distance ourselves, but still keep relations because, we can maintain IR. The same thing is for China, dude. It's like, we got to protect these rocks is like the way that you approach the world. And to protect these rocks will justify nuking everyone.
Okay, overview, then I'll touch on the framework and then the criticism in order. And my order for the criticism is the thesis, the links, the impacts, the alternative.
So I've just been watching the LOR, not flowing, but I'll write down something if I think it's important.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'm experimenting, right?
Right in my heart, okay? That's what you're doing right now. How would you like me to respond to that declaration? Do you also watch the PMR?
No, I flow the PMR. I just thought I'd let you know so you don't think I'm just hating on you for not flowing, right? Anyway.
So now you know if you say something important. If he's writing, then
I'll flow the fucking LOR. Jesus Christ.
I will write every word you say down there.
There won't be that many. Is everybody ready? Okay. The affirmative cannot concede that ethics is the way in which the judge should evaluate the round and expect to win the debate when they are conceding arguments that say that the way that they indoctrinate their PhD just replicates the harm of United States militarism all across the globe through our international relations. Just replacing one person with the Secretary of Defense and assuming that solves for the wars that they themselves has created is the sort of mentality that justifies the theory of realism and the theory of continued violence in international relations in the world. Let's go to the framework. I don't think they have a very strong argument on this case because they're literally sticking the negative to fiat or the status quo literally excludes thousands of critical arguments and critical education that can come in this world. But even if they are winning this argument, it doesn't matter because the K is a case turn, right? It does operate within the framework of the PMC. It still is just questioning whether realism is the framework that we should evaluate this around, and not whether net benefits is the round that we should evaluate this in. The other argument that I want to extend is that the flawed methodology leads to flawed policy makes a good argument about this, and that means the methodology must come first. The first evaluation and debate. Go to the thesis. Look. The turn case argument that we put on the impact level is how you should evaluate all of her arguments against the criticism. Do you have any question as to whether or not her arguments against the criticism are just threat constructions of nuclear war and terrorism? We have indicted these claims by indicating how terrorism is actually caused by the United United States. Things like drone strikes, the fact that we have thousands of bases all across the world, and the United States is the only one who's actually launched nuclear weapons seems to indicate that it could be us that's the true threat to violence in the status quo. They may go for this argument about deterrence theory, but our argument has been consistent since the beginning. It says that deterrence theory is just a myth anyways. In fact, we engage over and over again in these conventional wars in order to quote-unquote deter the nuclear war that they themselves have admitted. This invented. That's the word.
It's important.
Yes. They themselves have admitted. That's the argument of the links story that goes completely uncontested. They are also conceding arguments that say that when we don't step back to question the center of the affirmative, we always re-entrench these same harms. I know why you're not writing. It's because you've heard this before. Go to the alternative. It's because it's true. Okay. They may go hard for permutation, or this Butler argument about you don't need epistemological consistency. Doesn't matter in a framework where they are conceding that it's a choice between ethics. The permutation will always be a net worse in terms of ethics than the alternative alone, because it still includes at least some of the representations of the PMC. That is an argument that is consistent throughout the round. A reason to reject the permutation, apart from all of the other arguments that we have made. Our argument is that embracing vulnerability is a method by which we actually can secure an ethic of peace and an ethic of difference in our world. This is not a ludicrous argument. It says that we understand the vulnerability of ourselves and the risks that are posed to us, and the other. We don't have things like a Secretary of Defense, and we understand what does indeed connect us all as humans. We rehumanize the international relations. No access to that on the case, obviously, because all they do is just replace a figurehead and assume that that can solve for international relations. Let's go to the case now where I'll point out some of the arguments. If you have a doubt based on the killer arguments out of the LOC that either of these two advantages are going to happen, that should indicate that potentially all of our arguments on the impact level of the criticism are true. That potentially if Hegel does not have the capacity to 100% solve for every issue between Israel and Palestine, 100% solve for the Senkaku conflict, or America's international relations, and the way that we frame the question of Palestine and Israel seems to indicate that potentially they are asking the wrong questions. That only the ethical of the alternative asks the correct questions about how we should relate to the international community and to ourselves. Is that good?
Overview. Israel, Palestine. Threat fund. Yeah, no. They will be all in on this ethics argument. They will do absolutely nothing in a world where our inevitability and impact turns indict the ethic that they promote. We are saying that the world that you create is bad, and that the leap of faith taken by the affirmative is much better. On Israel, Palestine, you're considering the argument simply makes sense out of space to say that it is literally impossible for Israel to be able to press. I don't know what argument Miranda is referring to that makes you think that you won't buy this piece of paper. Mitch doesn't go here because he knows he's very far behind. You're not getting your offense because of the number 5 link that we're actually extending, and you are absolutely conceding that it's impossible for Israel to continue its suppression. This is devastating for you to surprise an external impact for us to wait, which says that reason war absolutely results in there are thousands of deaths, which indicate you're never able to solve backward. It's also devastating for you guys because it provides an alternate causality, except for the United States construction of ThreatCon that actually leads to these pressures. We indicate the United States actually is able to change the world where you don't make that this threat is constructed and is therefore not to be believed. You indicate that this is actually an indictment of the entirety of your position. There's an argument here about how this isn't a big enough change. That'll be addressed. Your argument is that the criticism turns the case. That is certainly not true in a world where we're responding to the criticism, right? That means that it is effectively not dropped because we are answering back the arguments that you believe turns the case. Your argument is that we never question the United States. That's absolutely not true. Read the uniqueness arguments, right? It's United States policy is bad now. It's not United States policy has a minor problem. We are a criticism of our policy throughout, which means that we are not a minor repair, which means that this thing that you think gets you out of the link level is absolutely devastating. Your third argument is that only Belcher can solve the ground, but we're actually questioning whether it is whether it is desirable to solve the threat construction, or whether we should continue with the affirmative. We have ethics to be promoted to the round 2. Absolutely get to know. What do you have Mitch's M before? Yeah. Breast military and Jimmy, listen, they are not responsive on the threat continental block. Italy is doing a very good job of this. She's outlining the security dilemma, which is absolutely fascinating. It indicates that in In an anarchic system, everybody knows that they can get wiped out at any time, which is a reason that they develop threats. Nothing there. What does that have to do with the United States? Your argument is the United States is actually leading this, which indicates that we brought this about. Shit goes back to Westphalia, homie, and you're doing absolutely nothing to indicate that we're able to change it. You are absolutely not responsible on this issue. The other argument I want is in number 2, which says that Christopher States uses does happen. This is an argument that says, unless every state is willing to abandon threat construction, then attempts to reject it fail. That's really devastating for you guys, because that means that not only will ThreatCon inevitably fail, but states won't even try it, right? Because they know that the one rogue state is absolutely devastating. You guys, you're not engaging with the specifics of whether ThreatCon is good or bad, which is absolutely devastating for you guys. You say that we make some terror arguments. Fine, we won't go for the terror arguments. Terrorism's awesome, but ThreatCon's cool in other instances. The other arguments, you said that we write the war before it occurs. Not true in a world where you're not even making the crappy ThreatCon claim that's supposed to get you out of these arguments, which is that we clearly construct the threats that are not real. You're conceding that these threats are real, and you're only making the argument about how we talk about the ground. You're also conceding that we get to weigh the case, which indicates the world where you don't indict our ability to solve for a threat. We're not actually writing war. Also, again, you're not engaging in the block, man. The block is a direct indictment of your criticism of ThreatCon. It indicates that all of your analysis about us writing the war into existence is false. Wars come about through people having zero-sum games, through people having conflicts, and through people having no way out other than to consider each other threats. There's no game on that question for Whitman. They will not be able to win the argument. The other one I want here is Emily's MO number 9 article, which indicates the girl's argument is actually bad because you would never want to embrace vulnerability. Listen, the LOC says don't embrace vulnerability. There are bad people who will do bad things to queer populations. That is dead right, and it is a reason why your alternative fails, right? You're constructing Hegel as a threat, as damn well you should be, which indicates that threat construction is always key to solve the type of impacts that you're talking about. This is an argument that says, the argument you're all in on, that we create problems at home is not going to be handled in a world where you don't construct it as a threat and recognize it. That is absolutely devastating. You're not capable of solving your own offense. We're not going for the current debate because we indicted the entirety of your criticism, which indicates that we are not the root cause of any of these conflicts, and we are actually preventing conflict. Actually, I'm going to go back to the deterrence argument. They say that there's no reason ThreatCon's key to deterrence. That's absolutely not true. You need to construct threats in order to be able to deter them. You need to know who threatens you. You need to be able to communicate, which means that communication and construction of threats is absolutely key to deterrence. We also tell you this solves back the largest impacts, which is the biggest violation of ethics, right? We tell you that ThreatCon stops nuclear war through deterrence, which indicates that our ability to solve through ThreatCon outweighs your ability to check back anything else. The threats that would create yours. Listen, your ethics discussion gets you absolutely nowhere. Your framework arguments indicate we can weigh the case and we can weigh our impact terms. We also indict the entirety of your ethic by saying it is wrong-headed and stops us from taking necessary actions. We propose our own ethic, our only faith that says we're actually able to control the world and we're able to make violence not inevitable. That is the ethical action that is standing out in this round, particularly when we've indicted your fundamental claim that threats are all constructed. They're not, we win.
As always, yeah.
Every time.
I know. It's like, look at the game.